Saw your dev chat. Okay, wait. Let me question though. Do you really think Unconstrained is going to be viable? It's 35% plus, not 35% X. Okay. Well, of course, if you've been in the stream mode as well, you know I'm currently experimenting with Unconstrained. Let me just make sure this thing doesn't spawn on me. Okay, so Unconstrained. The question was whether do I really think Unconstrained is going to be viable with the buff. And look, I think as you can see right now, Unconstrained is quite okay, right? And I just felt that Unconstrained is a little bit underpowered compared to the rest of them. Well, this is underpowered too compared to these two. And of course, you asked about the plus and the X, right? And this is kind of where Unconstrained gets a little bit misunderstood. So a lot of folks think that Unconstrained is the same thing as additive and it's the same thing with damage while berserking, and it really isn't. What this actually does is berserking has a base, the berserking buff grants you a base bonus damage of 25%. It is a 1.25 multiplier. So the berserking buff is not additive. The berserking buff is multiplicative. It's kind of like saying I have 200% vulnerable damage. I gain 25 more percent vulnerable damage. What does that do? Is it additive? Yes, it's additive. It goes from 200 to 225, but the vulnerable stat itself is multiplicative, right? So that's exactly how this works. The berserking buff, which has a base value of 25%, is multiplicative. This adds 25% to that number additively, but the stat itself is still multiplicative. So what this is actually it gives you a 50% damage buff whenever berserking is up. So some folks might be saying, wait, if this was already a 1.5 and this was just a 1.53, why is this? Does this feel so much stronger than this? And why does this feel so much stronger than this? And that's simple. It's because when you use Walking Arsenal, Gushing Wounds, or Unbridled Rage, you are still able to keep berserking up almost 100% of the time if you build for it. That means you get the 25% base value of the berserking buff by default. Then, so you get a 1.25 multiplier, then a 1.53 multiplier, or a 1.25 multiplier, multiplied by whatever core skill damage you get. Whereas with Unconstrained, right now, you only get a 1.25, a 1.5 multiplier, and that's it. So really, getting an additional 25% on the berserking buff is weak compared to everything else, right? So I think 10% would kind of bring it up just enough. I don't think it's going to be the meta or anything, and I don't think Unconstrained should. The purpose of Unconstrained is convenience. It's QOL. It's not like Walking Arsenal. You don't really have to worry about rotating through your weapons. It is not like Unbridled Rage where it only affects your core skill, right? You got to remember that berserking affects all the skills. So if I'm using a high damage skill like Death Blow, I mean, right now I'm only running it at rank 5, but I can get it to rank 9 and it'll be dealing like 30,000 damage, right? So if I multiply that, if I then run something like the Death Blow, the Weapon Mastery aspect, the DPS one, where it boosts my Weapon Mastery damage by up to 100%, well, yeah, I could be hitting really big numbers with Death Blow. And that number is buffed by berserking, it's buffed by Walking Arsenal, but it's not buffed by Unbridled Rage. So there's a balancing act going on there. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I really went off on a tangent with that. I get that your question was way more simple, so sorry about going off on a tangent. What are your thoughts on the state of barbs? It seems like they're in a pretty sad. Yeah. Okay. Yes, but barbarians are in a pretty sad state. All right, so there are two ways, right? So okay, what was the question for the benefit of those maybe just listening in? The question was, what are my thoughts on the current state of barbs? And it seems like barbs are in a pretty sad state, and I agree. Barbs are in a pretty sad state, even with the buffs. So see, there are two ways to look at this situation. There are two perspectives, okay? So if you look at it from the lens of within the Barbarian class, 1.1.1 made some really good changes. It does bring up in fact, Season 1 on a whole, it does bring up the viability of other builds that are not just, well, not just the triple shot meta, for example. And now in Season 1, obviously with the nerfs to tier 100s and all that, and the buffs to Barbarians that are coming, what you're going to see is that within the Barbarian class itself, there are going to be a lot more viable builds for tier 100s than just the traditional triple shout builds. And that's a good thing. So from that lens, the changes are good. But now on the flip side, when you look at it through the lens of Barbarian respective to the other classes, yeah, Barbarians are in a really, really sad state.
Buff still did nothing for Barbs. Everyone was crying about socks, but Barbs have been in a bad spot since 2 weeks after launch. It was strong like for like yeah, but crap. Okay, I completely agree with you. By the way, it's actually a funny story. This is actually a kind of a inside joke in my group of friends who play Diablo, because we have a couple of sock mains in the group. You know, where it's like, look, you guys have had the most powerful class in the game since Diablo 2. I totally understand that being weak for a month must feel like it's the end of the world. But you are talking to someone who has mained a Barbarian for a really long time. It's almost like, you know, maining a Barbarian in the Diablo franchise, you get so used to being treated badly by the developers, your class being treated badly by the developers, that you develop some sort of Stockholm syndrome and you start defending them. Like, oh, you know, in this Barbarian bubble, right? Oh, the class is fine, right? It might not be the greatest class, but it's fine. I'm still having fun. You know, it's like Barbarian players are in denial. But that's not even a joke. It's actually kind of true. Yeah, so Barbs are in a bad state relative to other classes. They are in a pretty bad state. You know, I wish they would kind of buff us so that there's some parity between the classes. You know, I can tell you that right now, today, before patch 1.1.1, this is the only time in the lifetime of Diablo 4 where you are ever going to see Sorceress, the Sorceress class, be viewed as the same level as a Barbarian. It just doesn't happen in the Diablo franchise. It's not something that happens. It is not working as intended. That sorceresses are in the same category as barbarians. That is not how the game was designed. You guys get that I'm joking, right? I'm just kind of taking the piss. Please don't clip this and be like, oh. Right, so that's where this is coming from. Oh, it's okay. That it all makes sense now, right? Yeah, Rob's video. I skimmed through the video. I didn't really watch the whole thing because I think it was like a 40-minute video or something. But yeah, I generally kind of got the gist of what he was saying, and I do agree with the most of it. What a waste. You should react. You should react. Look, I don't know if I really want to do react content, right? I mean, the whole world, the culture of the world, just it's binary, right? You are either for or you are against. Why can't I be for and against? For in some things, against in some things, right? Why can't I agree but also disagree with you? And I think that react content has a tendency to kind of fuel that. So I don't really know if I want to do be reacting to content, if you get what I mean. It's fine, nothing wrong with react. Oh yeah, I mean it's of course. I mean I'm not worried about the copyright, right? I know that it's transformative. It's not the copyright that I'm worried about. Folks like to take things out of context, right? I'd be saying like oh, you know, I he says this and I might say that, and then folks would just clip that and be like, oh, Crush disagrees with Rob, right? And then you start the whole situation where who the hell is Crush? Oh, Worry will defend you. Look, okay, all right. You guys really want me to react to Rob's video? Fine, I'll react to Rob's video and then I'll consider later on whether I want to. I don't have a screen dedicated for react content. Okay, so if I did, okay, let me bring up, so bring up YouTube and I do, okay, let's see if this works.
So the new hearts of the season theme on Barb are just really, really bad. That's like one of the problems I have with these balance changes that they
Okay,
recently.
wait. I need to put my headset on for this. All right. Okay, you guys wanted me to react to this video. Let's do it.
So the new hearts of the season theme on Barb are just really, really bad. That's like one of the problems I have with these balance changes that they recently did. It's like it's not addressing any of these issues that the Barb has with the season theme mechanic, because every other class got like very powerful class unique cards. You know, on the Necro you have the auto pull, the auto curse. You even have a 1 point, like a double damage multiplier, and all these kinds of things. On Druid you have this like crazy pixel pulls whenever you cast your ultimate and stuff. And on Barb, what you get, and this one is the most powerful heart type in the game, the Wrathful Heart, the one that you can slot into every piece of jewelry. And this heart is the Ignore Pain one. And all it does, why this heart is in the game, like what Barb really needs is damage, and this is not happening or help, is to.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna skip through it. I don't really want to kind of play every single minute of the video on stream. I agree with what he says here. I mean, what he's basically talking about is how barbarians, every class has class-specific hearts, and the ones that barbarians have are terrible. I mean, literally, look at this, right? Incoming damage has up to a 15% chance of being ignored and instead heal you. Now, I guess on paper, it sounds really great, but it's really not that good. In fact, it's so bad. This heart is so bad that I would actually prefer a 15% damage reduction. 15% chance of having damage ignored. That's so RNG. We really don't need more RNG, because at least 15% damage reduction is a flat damage reduction through the whole, through all sources, if you get what I mean. Having them kind of have this, it seems like their vision for the Barbarian class is this super tanky class. And great, if you actually made us really tanky, that would be good. Because even right now, without Challenging Shout, the Barb isn't all that tanky. And even with Challenging Shout, it's just kind of somewhat tanky, right? Yeah, so yeah, I completely agree with what he says here.
On Barb, you basically are forced to play the Barb because Barb already does no damage, and the only way to really do damage in endgame.
Yeah, right. So we are forced to play. We're forced to play the Barber. I mean, look, I'm playing the Barber right now, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about the Barber. Barber has its issues, especially in group play and how it affects other players. You know, I think that needs to be fixed. But the Barber in itself on the Barbarian is a very, very good gem or good heart. It enables a lot of builds to come online that weren't viable before.
After you spend a certain amount of Fury. Now, spending the Fury is pretty comfortable and easy. Like if you have the
Right. Okay. I watched this part. So what he's basically talking about here is how the Focus Rage Heart is bugged. Rob does spend a lot of time talking about this, so I'll skip over this whole thing later, but it's just one thing I want to talk about, right? Rob places a lot of weight on this heart. A lot of folks are placing a lot of weight and a lot of value into this gem or this heart. After spending Fury for the X amount of Fury within 2 seconds, your next non-basic skills critical strike, assuming this is working correctly, okay? The most that you can get out of this if you're not using whirlwind is 1 proc every other hit. That's the most you can get out of this heart. And what is that? An average of 18% crit chance. That's not very much for a heart. It's, if you're talking about comparing this to the value of a single legendary aspect, 18% crit isn't exactly worth a single legendary aspect. So, no, this heart is not that great. Now, of course, like what Rob is saying, this is very particularly useful for whirlwind because it's snapshots. Let's break that down for a second. Is it really that useful for whirlwind though? You know, if you guys have watched all my videos, you know that I don't even use Dire Whirlwind. The Dire Whirlwind aspect, I don't even use it. You know, maybe it's because I run Walking Arsenal, maybe it's because I run Mortal Draw, the way I build my character. I don't have an issue with crit. This doesn't really have that much value to me. Adding 36% crit, right? Giving up a heart for that, right? I'm more inclined to actually go with the heart that gives us critical strike damage, right? And then I'd swap one of my aspects to Dire Whirlwind, right? That would give, in my opinion, that would give me more damage than this heart could ever give me, right? So in that sense, I kind of I see what Rob is saying. I don't disagree with what he's saying, but I just don't really feel that this heart is all that good.
So these are good changes. They are small changes, but they will help the Barb during the leveling process where the class also feel weak. But the problem is these won't help the Barb in the end game, because this is not the way you generate fury usually in the end game.
Yep. Okay. So I completely agree with what he's saying here. Of course, if you guys follow my channel, you know that I don't actually think that barbarians have a problem leveling. Then again, this is Rob. He's played every class in the game, right? So he probably knows better than I do, relative to other classes, how easy or hard a barbarian is to level. I've only leveled barbarians, 3 of them, right? So I know for a fact that druids are worse off than barbarians at lower levels, because I have a couple of friends that main druids, and when we were leveling together, they were completely in shambles when they were leveling, and I was just like, dude, I feel bad for you as a barbarian. Yeah, I don't think Barb's that bad in low level. I had no problems leveling a barbarian myself, but I 100% agree with what Rob is saying, that this is kind of meaningless at in higher tiered content, because this is not how we generate fury.
Then we have a small double swing buff here. This one helps a bit. It's like a 25% damage buff, and I would definitely like to see more of this. You could do the same for Whirlwind. You could do the same for Hoda. You should definitely be looking into the upheaval one. That would be...
Yeah, I agree.
You have upheaval could have its damage doubled or something. And
I 100% agree. What he said there about upheaval, having the damage doubled, doesn't just apply to upheaval. I think a lot of barbarian skills could benefit from having the damage double. Frankly, you could double the base damage of every single one of the barbarian skills, and we might just kind of approach that line of viability relative to other classes.
And I don't think it still would be viable. But yeah, let's get more into that when we talk about the Hellhammer in a bit here. The problem with the Hellhammer is it's just like a yellow weapon seems to be still better. So I think they did 2 small changes on the Hellhammer. Pretty sure I have one in my stash. Here we have one. I actually hoarded one. But they did like 2 small little changes where they changed crowd control into crit damage, and they increased the burning a little bit. But man, I think a good yellow weapon that is well rolled is still better than Hellhammer. And what I would really like to see here is like what they have on other uniques on the Barb. I think on the Fields of Crimson, they have +6 ranks, for example. And that definitely helps. Did I upgrade mine, actually?
Yeah, I agree. Every single unique, I think it's a good thing. It's a good trend. If every single unique that clearly buffs a specific skill should have ranks to that skill. Steel Grasp +6. Rupture, where's the Rupture? Rupture +6. Okay, well, this one is a really bad roll, but so Rupture +6, right? Any weapon that directly buffs a specific skill should also give ranks to that skill. Actually, is this even showing properly, or is... So let me just disable this for a second. Okay, so yeah, so this needs to have some sort of damage buffing component to it, like this does. You know, that's what would make it a little bit more viable, right? Ignites the ground, burning enemies for an additional X amount of damage over 3 seconds. Any enemies that are standing on this burning patch take additional X amount of damage from whatever skills or whatever. I think that would help.
I think I may have upgraded. Here it is. So you see here, this one has +9 ranks to Rupture, or +6 as base. And I think something like that could really be done on the Barbarian as well. On the Hellhammer. To give it like 6 ranks or like something unique, because the dot effect is not going to do anything. And changing crowd control to crit damage is not going to do anything either. The upheaval just has such a long animation time.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't really like, you know, have a big impact. It feels good when you attack with it, but it's just so clunky, like the build up. It literally takes like a second to cast almost. So
yeah, and that's one thing about Barbarians as well. Some of our skills, like Rupture, Hellhammer, the animation is just way too slow. They really need to speed that up. I'm not asking for the Barbarian to be like a super fast class. We're not. We're Barbarians, right? Everything needs to feel like it has weight. But when you got to balance the practical gameplay aspect with the reality of having some weight. There's got to be a balance between the two. And right now, I think they're leaning too much into the whole weight and the reality of the physics of it, when in actual fact, you know, we really need, for the practical gameplay reasons, we need things to execute a lot faster than they are right now.
Not really that great. Well, then we have the Rupture change here. We get like a bit more damage on Rupture. But Rupture really has been killed after like all the Berserk ripping and all the outcome of the crazy damage numbers. It has all been like dialed down so much that Rupture essentially just deletes the dots that you have. And that's not really like any good mechanic, I feel, to have on the bar, because you can just wait these 5 seconds out for the Rupture to run out. And I don't think it's really worth putting it on your skill bar over like a Warcry or something. Send the dots with the Rupture. But now they are changing this. And I don't know, like, if they rethink it's a buff, but in the end, it's going to effectively nerf the build, because you're going to lose 20% cooldown reduction, and you're going to get some crit damage for it, which is not going to cut it. So the change to Fields of Crimson that they have in their patch notes is actually a net nerf to the Rupture build. And yeah, I can share this link. Here it is. And yeah, that's just like really sad to see, because Rupture is already a very underused mechanic. I don't really know what they could do. I think they should just re-enable it to like work with Berserk ripping. I mean, obviously, like, change double dipping, but I think the base mechanics are pretty nice of reapplying the bleeds and stuff. But yeah, we'll see what's going to happen with any of that. Well, and then we have the charge. And this one feels like a real problem. I was actually hyped yesterday when I like first reacted to it, because they literally doubled the damage of charge. They literally doubled it, which is good. And I was hyped until I tested it. So I don't know exactly like what they changed on top of this, but they did change some of the base fundamental mechanics of charge. So I have a clip here that was recorded by me during the beta. I think it was like the open beta server slam.
Okay, I didn't watch. I didn't watch this part of the video, so I'm actually curious to see what he says about charge, because I haven't personally played charge yet.
And you can see me here charging. And if you watch this clip carefully, like, I'm charging like, I think this is like at least 6 monsters, maybe it's 7, because they are like pixel pulled. And you see it's like taking the monster. Here you can see. It's taking the monsters, and it's taking them all together.
Not only do Barb have aspects that doesn't work properly, their hearts are one big...
Yep, that's what
Our
we just talked
paragon
about.
board needs some love. Legendary nodes are being avoided at all cost except Warbringer.
Yep.
Try...
Yeah, that's exactly me, man. Paragon board, like, just make sure you don't...
Yes. Oh, that comment was so spot on. Oh, it hits home, right? Look at that. No one takes legendary notes for barbarians. It's so bad. It's so bad. The legend. Look at this. This 8% on lucky hit. You could remove the lucky hit word and just give us 8%, and it still wouldn't be all that useful. It's so bad. The legendary notes are so bad on barbarians. I don't know what they would think. Look at this. 5% crit, and it doesn't even start at 5%. This could be 5% at the base value, stacking up to 25%, and then maybe it would be useful, right? Oh, killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to give you berserking? It should be killing an enemy gives you berserking for 5 seconds. That's what it should be, right? Oh, it's so bad. The legendary notes are so bad on barbarians. Oh, it's so bad.
Don't select any legendary node, because they're all... The only node you could be going for is this one. Everything else is like... like F tier, man. Like read some of these, man. Hello? Like, how are we not getting buffs?
Decimator, exactly, right?
Weapons have an 8% chance to make enemies vulnerable. Like, bruh, what are we even talking about? Man, it's so crazy to me. Like, 8% chance against, like, 8% chance, but only against vulnerable, and only if you're lucky hit. Like, once in a blue moon, basically. Like, man, they're just so bad. It's crazy, man.
I'm sorry. It's just Barbarian main watching another Barbarian main complain about. I totally feel what he's saying right now.
Here, overpowering with your 200 weapon, stuns enemy for 1 second. And for 2 seconds. Yeah, okay, we don't even want to get into legendary notes on this, but man, it's like, not that bad. Oh, it's so crazy. Yep. But yeah, to finish the charge thing. So this was charge in the beta. open beta. You charge, you take like all the monsters with you, and you slam them into the wall, and it resets your cooldown instantly. You guys remember like the Raycar Barb in D3, like the perma charge Barb, like super
Yeah,
popular,
recall.
very unique playstyle. And I had hopes that this would be possible, you know. Look at this. Like, this charge was so cool. It takes, like, all the monsters, it pulls them, it resets the cooldown. Whenever you slam them into the wall, you see the cooldown resets happening. I killed the monster here, but, like, even more resets happening. Really good.
Compare the board to a druid's board. It's just insane, brother. It's insane.
The druid just has, like, a 1.45 multiplier on, like, 3 different boards, man. And Barb has an 8% chance on lucky hit to make things vulnerable for 2 seconds. Meanwhile, on Druid or on Necromancer, you explode 5 corpses on Necro. They auto-explode, by the way. And you get like a 1.4 damage multiplier. On Barb, you have an 8% chance.
It makes you want to. It makes you want to cry as a barbarian, right? It just makes you want to cry.
Vulnerable for 2 seconds. It's just not a comparison, dude. But yeah, this charge is pork. You see, like, clearly you can charge, you can perma-charge, or at least you were able to do that. And there has been a recent patch where that has been changed. And they, I don't know, nobody was already playing charge. And as tell you in-game. So this rune reads, like, charge base cooldown was like 20 seconds.
Yeah, this was
And
nerfed.
this cooldown, yes. But look what charge is doing now. Because you permanently reset your charge cooldown, yes. But
Yeah,
look what
so
charge is doing now.
so what he's talking about is the nerf to the cooldown, and they shouldn't have done that. You don't even need to play a charge barbarian to know that that was just bad change. And it's really obvious why they did it as well. Right? It's because they foresaw that, season 1's going to bring this whole charge, multiple charge thing in, so we can't have them doing infinite charges. There's going to be a potential for it being OP, right? But really, clearly it's not OP.
I think I should probably remove my weapon because I might kill them. Boom. Like, it only takes maximum 3 monsters. Let me show it to you like a bit more clear when I have like a lot more monsters. Hope I don't kill them instantly. You see? It only takes like 1 monster.
Oh, wow.
And the engine charge looks super cool because like now you actually call 4 of them. But it's just not a comparison because it doesn't even pull them anymore for some reason. Look. Like, I pull like 2 monsters. 2 of them. Instead of all of them because I now have like 4. Look, this was like 2 or 3 monsters. And I don't know why. Like, it actually looks super cool.
Wow, okay, that's
but it
bad.
doesn't, like,
This is
mechanically
bad.
work properly. And some people say it's because of these boots, but even if I remove the unstoppable boots here that make me move through monsters, it's still not changing it, man. I don't know, like, what or how they broke it, but it just doesn't function. Like, you just can't charge monsters. Look at all these monsters. Like, they just somehow don't get charged. And it's just really sad to see because, man, I was looking forward to charge, and I know many people were. And this...
Okay, well, I've never played charge before in Diablo 4. So I didn't know that this was happening with charge. This is really bad. That just feels bad, man.
just has no benefit anymore. And again, like you were able to pull, you know, like all these monsters and like just permacharge like this, but I don't know, man. I guess players were like already not using it, so they nerfed it. It's like, so crazy to me. And you see here, like you can clearly see like how it like takes all the monsters. Look at it. So I had some hopes for Charge Barb actually. I had some hopes. But yeah, they got destroyed pretty quickly after I figured out. And so I guess the running theory, I don't know, this might be copium. You see, power charge is kept to 3 targets. And the theory is that somehow this change screwed over the mechanics of the skill, so it can now only pull 3 targets. Even though it doesn't say that. Like, it basically reads, become unstoppable and rush forward, pushing enemies with you. Like, it should push all the enemies. Especially if I have 4 of the engines. If I do this pull that I just did, in my opinion, it should pull all the enemies and push them into the wall and pixel them and stun them and reset my cooldown, and then I can do it again. This would be an actual charge barb build, similar to how people really enjoyed it in Diablo 3. Like, having no cooldown, like perma-charging the monsters, and they will become unstoppable at some point anyways, so it's already not OP. But it would be a fun build. Now it's just like dead on arrival, in my opinion. Even though they doubled its damage, they make...
Yeah, I agree. It just feels bad, man. This thing just feels bad. So yeah, I watched the video, but I kind of, when he first posted it, I kind of skimmed through the video. I didn't really watch this part, so I didn't know it was that bad for Charge. That just feels bad, man. I mean, I personally will probably never play Charge because I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy Ray Cause at all. I didn't enjoy Leapquake. Leapquake and Charge have never been my favorite builds for a Barbarian. It's always been Whirlwind. I'm kind of sad that Frenzy isn't a thing.
I would love to play a Frenzy Barbarian in Diablo 4, where I'm talking about a proper Frenzy Barbarian, like it was in Diablo 2, right? Where you really just ran around and you just wrecked stuff with Frenzy, and you're zooming, you're basically zooming all over the map. You know, just you remember, if you guys played Diablo 2, you know what I'm talking about. You go Frenzy Barbarian and you're just zipping all over the place like a freak, right? And that I miss that build, and I wish that they would do that for Diablo 4, well, for Frenzy with Diablo 4. It felt so good to play a Frenzy Barbarian in Diablo 2.
Tier list, and Upheaval is probably still down there in F tier, just like all the other ones. Then, okay, Aggressive Resistance. This one gives us a bit more damage reduction when we Berserk. It's pretty okay.
Yeah, this is a good change.
Buff, not really too impactful, but we have it. Gushing Wounds, yeah, Bleed and Rend builds in general need a lot of help. The Overpower, I don't know if anybody of you uses Overpower in Diablo 4, but I think the mechanic needs a complete overhaul. Overpower is completely worthless. It would be, I mean, I think the general concept of this, and they touched on this in the recent developer talk.
I completely agree with what he's saying. Overpower needs to be reworked. I talked about it in my last video. They really need to figure something out with Overpower. It's just the way it functions right now. It needs more consistency with it.
And this one, I guess, is a decent damage buff. 15% more crit scaling. It's not enough to make Rend Barb or any Bleed Barb viable. Like, I think this needs like a 50% buff or something to even be considered over stuff like not Unconstrained, over stuff like Unbridled Rage. Because, I mean, Unbridled Rage is just so much stronger. Like, it just gives you a 2.35 multiplier, which is like, a lot more if you just don't stack crit on your gear. Because it's gonna, like, take a lot of stacks. So I think if they put this one to, like, 150 or something, that would be a good value. And then
I mean, I personally was saying 130, right? 30% more. But yeah, 150. We need large buffs in damage, right?
Here we have Unconstrained, and there's a lot of misconceptions, and I think the tooltip is also very misleading. So I'm super happy that they adjust this. But the tooltip here still says it's plus damage, and it's not a separate multiplier. I have not retested that to confirm. But if it's just additive 35, it's not really going to change much, right? Like, Berserking increases damage bonus by plus 25%. So again, this is not a multiplier, it's just additive. But this one probably has to be retested after the patch, because I tested this like in some other version of Diablo 4, so we'll have to see how this one will be when it's on the patch. If it is a multiplier, then I could see it being played. But right now it has a plus on it. And, well, plus, it doesn't always mean that it's actually plus, because even if the tooltip says it plus, it might still be an X. We don't know, we have to test it when it comes out. But
yeah. So like I explained earlier, right? So it's not inaccurate. It is a plus. It's just it's a plus within its own bucket. What I think Rob is trying to say is he wants it to be 1.25, which is the multiplier of Berserking, multiplied by 1.35. I think this is what he wants it to be, which would then make the multiplier 1.68, and that would be an even better thing if that's what they actually do, right? So instead of having a 1.25 plus a 1.35, 1.25 plus 0.35. For a 1.6 multiplier, you have 1.25 times 1.35, which is a 1.68 multiplier. So that's what I think Rob is referring to, right? And if that's really what they do, that's a really good thing. I mean, 1.68, a multiplier of 1.68 is better than a multiplier of 1.6.
It's just additive, then, well, you're still going to play Unbridled Rage, and you're not going to play Unconstrained. But at least a step in the right direction. Same for the Walking Arsenal, good change here, I think. Like, small change, very minor change. It's not really going to affect any of the builds. Then we have a slide.
Yep, it's the Walking Arsenal change. I mean, obviously, as a Walking Arsenal main, I love the change. I think perhaps I don't disagree with what he's saying in that it's a small change, but he is right in saying that it doesn't make or break any build, any Walking Arsenal build. What it does is it's quality of life. It's QOL, right? Having a longer buff is QOL. It just makes the builds less clunky, makes the rotation a bit smoother. So from that perspective, it is a small change, but from the other perspective of how well the build plays, it's a pretty decent change. It's a significant change in QOL.
Change here, like, we get 8% more on Ancestral Force, and I mean, Hota damage has been divided by 4 or something after the Quake nerf and after all the stat nerfs. So Hota, I think, is in a really, like, bad damage spot in comparison to before. So
Yeah, 100% agree with this. Like, exactly what I said in my previous video. 8% is nothing compared to what they took away from Hotel Barbarians. I know it was a bug. I know they were just fixing a bug. Barbs were not relying on a bug to cheese the game. Barbs needed to rely on the bug quake mechanic just to be viable.
Barb is just so weak, and the best builds, like which is Whirlwind and Hoda, like they didn't even get any buffs, while the other classes are just like up there, like blasting 20 years.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't mention this in my previous video when I kind of did the react to the dev stream. I was actually very disappointed they didn't do anything for Whirlwind. Do something for everything, right? For all our core skills. When I didn't see Whirlwind there, I was like, really? You guys think that Whirlwind is fine? You guys think that 8% for Hota is enough? This should be like 25%. You took away like 75% of our damage from Hota. The fact that the developers don't seem to realize that's the spot that Barbarians are in right now is sad at the same time. As a Barbarian main for so long, you kind of get used to it, right? You don't expect too much from the developers because clearly for the last 25 years, different teams of developers seem to have this blind spot when it comes to Barbarians, right? Barbarian just exists in their blind spot and they don't really quite know what to do with the class, right?
You know, it's just crazy to me. Like how crazy the imbalance is between a Barbarian, Sorcerer, and then all the other three classes. Like they're just so far ahead right now. Like I've seen Necromancers like completely and Druids completely speedrunning 100s like it's no problem with like 3 different builds. And maybe on Barb you have one build that can like remotely do it, but still struggle in comparison to those classes. So it's crazy. Hey. Yeah, the Sorc patches are, there's some good stuff on the Sorc side, but we want to mainly focus on the Barb stuff right now. And
I mean, yeah, I saw that. Yes, but again, like what I mentioned earlier, right, with regards to the current season, I know that level 91 Sorc that cleared tier 100, that's nothing special. It's nothing special because they nerfed the crap out of the scaling for Nightmare Dungeons. Nightmare tier 100 is now a Nightmare 70, a tier 70 in preseason, right? If a Sorc couldn't clear a tier, had problems clearing a tier 70, I'd be really sad, right? Of course, you know, folks see tier 100 and they're like, oh, level 91 Sorc clears a tier 100. Sorcs are fine. No, they are not. Sorcs are not fine. Just as Barbs are not fine. Great, you cleared a tier 100. What is that going to do? What does that mean? When they basically halved the amount of HP and almost half the amount of HP and the amount of damage that mobs do at tier 100. And then you put a Sorc in there and the Sorc clears it with the Barber gem, by the way, right? Could he have done it without the Barber? I don't know. I don't play a Sorc. I don't main a Sorc. But you have to use the Barber. Just like how Barbs are probably going to be able, level 90 Barb probably would be able to clear tier 100 right now in season 1 if they use the Barber gem. It's just how it is, right? But that doesn't mean that the problem is fixed. The problem is still there. It just, right now, folks are still not used to seeing tier 100 clears in certain situations. So they see tier 100 and they think, oh, the problems are fixed. No, it's not. Tier 100 got that much easier. If your class or build can't clear a tier 100 by the time you are level 100, there's a problem with your build or there's a problem with your class. That's what I think, right? So I really hope that maybe if some of you are Sorc mains, you can tell me whether the Sorc changes actually made a difference for you guys. Because, right, 1.1.1 was supposed to be a Sorc and a Barb patch with a particular focus on a Sorc. So if they said that, and they put so many changes on the table and it didn't fix your class, I feel really bad about it, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's too great. It's not really going to change anything on the Barb. It's not going to make like all these unused builds playable. Upheaval is still a big meme. Hellhammer is still a big meme. Rupture, Bleed is still like bad. They need a lot more, I feel. Then we have, Death Wish, okay, a slight buff to Thorns Barb. This one is always welcome. Very nice stuff. Thorns is already a decent build within the Barb class itself. Obviously, you can always say like Whirlwind, Hoda, Thorns are decent builds if you only look at Barbarian, right? But if you compare it to a Tornado Druid or to a Bone Spear Necromancer, man, you're just feeling bad.
See, that's what I mean. The two perspectives to look at it, right? If you look at it within the Barbarian class, it's fine. But the minute you look at it from the lens of comparing it to other classes, it's really not great. It's not a good situation.
Then we have the Unrelenting Fury. This one was Not really used much. Maybe it's gonna see some more use. It's 50% buff here. Could be pretty cool. At least when you hit the boss.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we talked about the charge changes, like charge mechanic wise, it's just not working properly. And I think this is the second buff to Burning Rage. I think it's still bad, like these base multipliers. And didn't they say they want to buff the Dust Devils as well? Maybe we're gonna see that in the final patch notes. I think it would be really cool if they do the whirlwind Dust Devils, if they make it do something like that'd be really nice. Because people like the whirlwind barb, and if they have some.
So like I mentioned, right, the problem with this is the fact that it does fire damage. Rather than just kind of incrementally buffing it, if they just swapped it to physical damage, they wouldn't need to buff the damage, right? But that doesn't mean it'll be viable. It just means that they wouldn't need to keep buffing this damage right here. Just change it to physical damage, right? Now, for the Dust Devils thing, what I kind of hope for with Dust Devils is they make the Dust Devils a bit less random. Either make it spawn more Dust Devils more frequently, or make the Dust Devils at least have some sort of targeting mechanic. Let's see if I can illustrate this. Whoa, why is this so small? All right, so right now Dust Devils come out and they just kind of randomly move away, right? Let's say you have all the mobs, all the mobs are here. You have mobs, right? And then you're spinning through, and then the Dust Devils, they just kind of do this, and they kind of do that, and they kind of do this, right? What they need to do, okay, is they need to have the Dust Devils come out and then circle back into one central spot, and then and circle back to one central spot, and then come out and circle back to one central spot, and then they just kind of congregate on one target, right? So imagine if you had like 4 Dust Devils around, and all of them went out randomly for 1 second, and then they each locked onto a target and started following that target. That would solve all the problems with Dust Devils. Dust Devils doesn't have a damage problem, by the way, right? As I've shown in my previous videos, you can have a 1. Well, at least preseason mine was 1.4k. You could have a 1.4k Dust Devil scale all the way up to about 400k damage, right? 400k per tick. Now, just imagine you have that 400k. You have like 4 Dust Devils going out, and it all converges onto one target. And it's just 400k, 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 right? That's going to be great. That's a good change. That's what I feel that they should do for Dust Devils, And of course, obviously, they could buff the damage, right? But how they buff it is important. I think that the developers said a really good thing in the campfire stream where they said they wanted to find a way to make all these flat damage things scale properly in the high end game, because it's difficult to make flat damage scale. It's easy to make percentages scale.
Around doing stuff, that would be cool. Then we have the Bokatos. So you would think this is a nice buff to leap, and it works. But the problem is, with the nerfs to leap and the nerfs to cooldown in general, the leap builds are not really possible like that anymore. So I made this video, and I'm also going to link in the description here, where you can basically perma-leap. You see me here, like, leaping all the time. But I did the math, and after the cooldown reduction nerfs, this is not really possible anymore. Like, you can't leap like this. Because they nerfed all the cooldown on leap, and just cooldown in general on your amulet and on the helm. So you're losing like 5% cooldown here, 5% cooldown here. And it is what made the perma leap possible. So it's nice that they buff leap, but I think you're gonna have like a half second, like leap downtime now. So you can't really leap like this. And yeah, that's just like feels bad overall too. If the leap build like just can't leap anymore because like of the cooldown reduction changes.
So this is something that I really feel that Path of Exile does better than Diablo 4 or Diablo 3 for that matter. This problem started in Diablo 3. If any of you have played Diablo 2, cooldowns weren't really a thing in Diablo 2. And the whole obsession with giving us cooldowns started with Diablo 3. If you look at Path of Exile as a base game, I feel that Path of Exile was born out of that, the unhappiness players had with Diablo 3, and I was one of the players that was really unhappy about Diablo 3. I was unhappy about how Diablo 3 launched, and I was even more unhappy when they put Loot 2.0. So that's why I started playing Path of Exile myself, and Path of Exile is a great game. I have something like 7,000 or 8,000 hours on Path of Exile, right? So Path of Exile kind of took what Diablo 2 did, and it just kind of kept what was good. There are very few cooldown skills in Path of Exile. I mean, if you saw the Exile Con, right? They even addressed it specifically. We don't want to give you cooldown skills where possible, but there are some skills we can't get away from that have to have a cooldown. And I think that that is the healthy approach for cooldowns in an action RPG. Having a resource and having a resource cost associated with a skill, the purpose of that is to limit how often and how frequently or how many times you could use a certain skill in quick succession. That was the purpose of resource. Right now they have resource and then they have cooldown reduction on top of that serving the same purpose. It's like double dipping into a negative, right?
And I really hope they, just reduce like all the base cooldown values on all skills or something like by 20-30%. So we could do this again. Like I think a lot of people.
No, I don't think that's. I can see why he's asking for that. I think that Path of Exile's approach to cooldown reduction is really the way to go. The games can learn from one another, right? They need to learn from one another. Diablo 4 needs to learn from Path of Exile when it comes to cooldown reduction. Each game has things that they can learn from each other, right? And at this point, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to leave it as that, right? Otherwise, this is going to devolve into a whole Diablo versus Path of Exile conversation. I don't really want to go there.
The Sleepquake playstyle. I think it was really cool to play, really fun build. And yeah, just perma-leaping just feels good, man. And yeah, with a very slight buff by changing physical to vulnerable. But I don't really understand the philosophy, because didn't they nerf vulnerable to make it not as mandatory? And now they are changing the uniques to have vulnerable on it, making it, again, more mandatory to proc vulnerable. Like, I think there's like a disconnect with like what the goal is. Like, do you want every class to focus on vulnerable, like by changing this to vulnerable, or do you not want that? And then why do you change it? Like, it's just like, feels weird to have the vulnerable nerf and then revert these while they want to go away from vulnerable. And now they are changing physical. Physical damage is basically something that every Barb build can use. While vulnerable is a stat that not every Barb build can use, but is forced to use because it's the best. And now even more so. So
yep, that's accurate. Right. Even after they nerfed vulnerable, they claimed that they nerfed it because it was overperforming. They didn't want folks to rely on it. But okay, I think one thing to understand here, and I didn't talk about this in my previous video, right? This seemed, for the way they describe it, the context that the developers gave us is this first nerf to vulnerable and crit damage was just the first step in them fixing vulnerable, and I agree that that was a necessary step. What I don't agree with is that there's such a big lag time between the nerf and then the fix for vulnerable, right? And we don't even know how they're intending to fix vulnerable. I kind of gave my perspective in my previous video on how I think they should fix vulnerable. I think they should make vulnerable additive and create more damage buckets, right? When you create more damage buckets than players can practically build into, no damage bucket feels mandatory. If you have a small number of damage buckets that players can build into all the damage buckets, now all the damage buckets are mandatory, right? So that's my philosophy when it comes to damage buckets. I know what Rob is saying. He's saying the developers sound confused, right? Do they want to nerf vulnerable? Do they not want to nerf vulnerable? I don't think it's as complicated as that. I think it's pretty simple, right? They know that vulnerable, even after the nerf, in the current state of the game, is vulnerable still the strongest stat? It's still one of the strongest stats, along with crit damage. Even post-nerf, it is still one of the strongest stats to build into. So based on that alone, if you remove the other context from it, is vulnerable damage strong? Yes. Is vulnerable damage stronger than physical damage? Yes. So therefore, is it a net buff to swap physical with vulnerable? Yes. And that's why they did it, right? There's no conspiracy behind that. I mean, sure, that it might look like they're confused, but I think it's just more empirical than that. Though like I did mention in my last video, I think swapping physical damage was the wrong stat to swap on Romulatnis. They should have swapped damage whilst dual wielding or the lucky hit chance. They removed the lucky hit thing and they put vulnerable damage there. That would have been even more ideal, in my opinion.
This is like a bit of a question mark on the design philosophy, I guess, because yeah, it just like doesn't really add up. And then 100,000 steps, like this one doesn't really do anything. It's a step in the right direction, but this legendary, especially with the ICD here, this can only happen every 30 seconds. If this had no ICD and just could happen all the time, if you get the final bonus, that would be a really nice item. But I don't know, like I don't really like what they are like on about with all these like cooldowns and ICDs, having to wait before you do something, man. It's like anti-fun to me, man. Like having to wait. Like, even in game now, like, with all these cooldown changes, man, like, I cast my Warcries, and I have to wait, like, 20 seconds before I can press my button again. Like, that's not fun to me, man. You know, we're in an ARPG and stuff. Like,
Yeah, I 100% agree. 100%
I don't
agree.
know, like, I think, like, just having all this, like, cooldowns and all this, like, wait times is just, like, a very nice way of nerfing all the fun out of it. And I think this ICD is just the same thing. Like, why not make it, you know, without an ICD? Like, just, like, let it proc every time you get the final bonus for your Walking Arsenal, and let it proc a Ground Stomp. And that Ground Stomp...
Yeah, how, you know, sometimes you gotta think, how bad would it be, right? I 1000% agree with what Rob is saying here. And I felt so myself, probably more so than Rob, because I main a Walking Arsenal build. And this is a Walking Arsenal boots. It's meant for Walking Arsenal. And I've tried so hard, I tried so hard preseason to make this work with my build. And it just doesn't. It doesn't. It sounds so good on paper. It sounds so good because you have that aspect, that the earthquake aspect for ground stomp that buffs your damage whilst you're in the earthquake. It is a perfect synergy, except that they put a 30-second internal cooldown, and it's so stupid, right? It's pretty funny, right? 100,000 steps, no run speed. How long is it going to take you to hit 100,000 steps? Like 6 years, right? And then they put dexterity on a barbarian pair of boots. Like, come on now. Make this strength. Change the stun to run speed. Reduce this internal cooldown to 4 seconds. And we're freaking golden. Right? We're golden.
can cause an earthquake. Like, why not? Make it crazy. I mean, it's a unique item. It's one of the, you know, hardest items to get in the game, apparently. And it should be good, man. It should feel fun. But it just doesn't, man.
Hey Rob, when Sork Smiley
Not really the hardest item to get, man. Level 80, I found like 5 of these. It's not, wait, where is it? Yeah, okay, well, so I do have 2 of these, right? I have 2. I found like 5 of these, and I'm level 80. It's not a rare item at all. It's kind of like Mobalytics, right? It just drops all the time. Gauze to me is harder to find than this, right?
face.
Yeah, we'll see about Sorry, man. Thank you for the support. And then we have the battle trends. And people have been asking me, like yesterday already, Rob, the changes to battle trends, do they make Frenzy Barb viable? Man, what about Frenzy Barb?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Have to see a Frenzy Barb or something. But unfortunately, guys, I got news for you. This won't make it any more viable. Like, I think the game is clearly not designed to make a build that's based on basic skills. I think that's pretty sad, man, because we had this like thing in D3 and in other games as well with, you know, the Death Diggers and like a lot of things that multiply basic damage. And we're really missing it here. And obviously this change is only buffing the attack speed of skills that are not Frenzy. So they clearly do not intend you to play like a generator damage-based build. Like a generator is more like a support skill for your main damage. And that's why there's no Frenzy Barbs or no serious Frenzy Barbs or generator Barbs out there. I think this would be very cool to have the option to make, you know, more build diversity, more build variety by making, you know, a Frenzy Barb. But yeah, we just, like almost every build is just centered, you know, around the core skills. Like all the other builds, man, they just make sure it's not viable. It feels like Charge getting a buff but getting a nerf at the same time. Like Frenzy, the generator's getting some buff, but then like there's no damage multipliers for them and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It just leaves like a bit better taste. And yeah, I'm just hoping like, you know, to have some constructive feedback here. And yeah, I went through every change basically and just gave my opinion and think what they are clearly not working, especially this one. It's just like bugged in like 5 different ways. And then the super hard, like the most rare hard on Barb, just doesn't really work, and it's actually worse than a normal hard. And I don't know, that's not where Barbarian should be, in my opinion. And this is supposed to be the big Barbarian buff patch, and I feel it's not it, man. I feel it's not it, and I think many people in the community feel the same way, partially because of some of the reasons that I just shared here. I just wanted to make this a little overview, guys.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree with what he's saying, right? Especially the last part. I personally was, you know, they were selling. I think the developers kind of tried. I think the problem is they oversold the patch initially, saying, "Oh, it's the barbs and socks. We're looking at the barbs and socks, right?" And they realized, "Oh no, wait, that's gonna overhype it." So they kind of tried to pull it back. If you kept track of what the developers were saying, and as it got closer and closer to the last campfire chat, they kind of pulled back a little bit and said, "Hey, wait. This is more sock focused than Barb. More sock than Barb. More sock than Barb." They were kind of trying to manage the barbarian players. And when I saw that, you know, um, I kind of knew, right, that, oh man, this is, you know, all I got left is just I hope that they make some nice changes. But based on what they're saying, it sounds like they're trying to manage the barbarian expectations, because it does, you know. So I was disappointed when I didn't see a lot of the changes that I talked about, like a buff to whirlwind, a buff to all the core skills, and other things. Like, I was disappointed, but I wasn't surprised that I didn't see those changes, because they were kind of going real hard into managing our expectations in the days leading up to the campfire chat for barbarians anyway. So anyway, wow, this was supposed to be the stream where I gun for like level 81 or 82, but hey, you guys really wanted me to react to Rob's video. No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it, man. Not in this stream. Hey, you asked me to react to Rob's video. I did one react. I'm not going to react to DM's video. I assume by DM you mean Darth microtransaction, right? Which video are you talking about? The one where he says that the gaming is ruined. Is that the one you're talking about? I don't have the time. I have to go, right? So but yeah, I got to end the stream in like 10 minutes tops. React stream, let's go. No react stream. No. I reacted to one video and it was a long one. Right? React to Asmon? No, I'm not doing it, folks. I'm not doing it. Oh, react to Asmon. I can't react to Asmon. I don't have the man's level of intelligence. Yeah, I just don't. No, not happening. All right. Anyway, folks, this was a really enjoyable stream for me. I mean, I think ever since I started streaming, we've never had so much participation. I mean, obviously, you guys in chat are familiar names. I mean, you guys talk to me a lot whenever I stream, but this kind of interaction, this is a first. I mean, I just started streaming, so a lot of firsts, right? But this is a first for me, and I think it's really pleasant. It was really enjoyable to interact with you guys like this, and you actually managed to talk me into reacting to someone's video. That was unplanned for me, but yeah, I guess we'll be getting level 82 another time, right? And anyway, I gotta go. I really gotta go. Thanks for hanging out, folks, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.